Hi everyone, I'm Paul Orfanos, National Community Engagement Manager at Delphi Bank, which is a division of the Bendigo Adelaide Group, and welcome to Delphi Connect, a segment where, as part of our commitment to community engagement, we bring you leading experts from fields as far and wide as economics and the markets, property, health, scientific research, community affairs, just to name a few. Hopefully you'll find our segment both informative and enjoyable. Let's move straight on to today's guest, Professor Andy Koronios, who is Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of SmartSAP Cooperative Research Centre, and a person who's in his own ways reaching for the stars. Andy, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you.
Now, Andy, we hear much about the space industry, and I can appreciate that some people, such as yourself, look up to the sky and see an industry, whilst others see a great void. Why is there so much interest in space, and why do we spend so much money in this field?
Yes, that is a great question, Paul. I think from the time that we existed, humans, we've all have been explorers. From the time we came out of the caves, we wanted to see what was over the hill. And we did that, and we explored our world around us. Eventually, we said, well, okay, we've seen the hill, now let's see the seas. And we've explored all the seas. We've seen all of the continents on our little planet. But then we looked up at the stars. We said, wow, these are great unknown areas. Can we find out what they are? And many times we thought they were gods. In fact, I think there'll be nearly, I'm not sure, probably 100 nations whose flags have either got stars on them or the moon. So we always had a passion for exploration. And that is one of the reasons why we then went into space and we continue to explore the limits of space, which of course is infinite. But there is another reason as well, Paul, because space provides a huge economic benefit. And that is why countries are spending significant resources in accessing space, in utilizing and exploiting space. And that activity itself actually also helps us here on Earth. Many listeners may be surprised to know that the scratch resistant lenses, for instance, that we all use for our glasses were actually a direct result of experimentation in space. So was smoke detectors and ear thermometers and shoe insoles, invisible braces for our teeth, the cordless tools that all of the tradies are using these days. There's so many of those that are really, really the result of what we've done in space. And there are actually quite a lot of technical skills and know-how that we have developed because of our space exploration.
Now, many people will have an image in their minds of what a satellite may look like, but how do these satellites, Andy, affect our lives? And I know you gave us a few details of how space exploration has affected our lives, but how do these satellites improve our communities in general?
Yeah, they do improve our communities. In fact, we're all dependent on space. Let's just look at your life. You wake up in the morning, perhaps without an alarm, but if you had an alarm, most likely it would be your iPhone or your mobile phone. That mobile phone would not work without the precise timing that satellites provide all of us. All of our clocks are synchronized through satellite clocks that the GPS system in particular, and indeed we talk about the GPS system as a way for us to find our way around, to be able to navigate. But the moment that you wake up, you perhaps turn the TV on to see what the news of the day is, or you check your iPad. Most of that news, and particularly the international news, will come to us via satellites. Most of the communications today would be via satellites. If you want to see a real-time event somewhere, again, satellite communications plays an important role. The weather is because of weather satellites that actually give us a good indication of whether it's going to rain, snow, or be sun shining tomorrow. So there are just about every walk of our life, everything that we do, the way we work, play, and live our lives is impacted in some way or another by satellite communications, by space technologies.
Now, many people believe the space industry is the domain of the world's superpowers. Why should Australia be involved in the space industry?
Right. Well, that is actually true. It used to be the case that superpowers, government-sponsored really satellite systems, and some mega companies, very huge global companies, were able to build satellites because in the past, satellites were large, they were complex, and they were very, very expensive. For instance, just to give your listeners an indication of the bigger satellites, they may be as big as a minibus or an SUV. They are very complex, high-tech systems, and they would cost in the vicinity of $500 million each to design, to build, and then to launch. Today, what we call Space 2.0, the new generation of space, and because of the miniaturization of electronics, the electronics that go in your iPhone and so on in computers, but also the high computational power, as well as artificial intelligence and big data. And they have resulted in the cheaper access to space. Because if space and the cost of space relies very much on how heavy the rocket and the payload will be and how big it will be. So if things are small, and now they are much smaller than that, therefore it's much cheaper to put them into space. And a modern satellite that actually gives you some really, really good capabilities can be as small as a toaster or a cereal box or a small microwave oven if it was a bigger one. And they would cost you probably $1, $2, or $3 million to make, not $500 million, but only one or two. And to launch, maybe it will be $500,000, depending on the size of the satellite. Today, we can launch satellites at a price of around $30,000 to $50,000 per kilogram. And that's an order of magnitude different to what we could do yesterday and certainly 2 or 3 orders before.
Certainly, things are changing.
Yeah,
Andy,
absolutely.
You have a very interesting personal story. How does a child born in Greece and raised by his grandparents end up a leading space scientist in Australia?
Thank you. Well, it's been the lottery of my life, I guess, Paul. I have been extremely, extremely lucky. I was lucky because my family had too many children, and I was lucky because they were very poor. And because of that, they gave me to my grandmother to raise me. Um, Luckily, my grandmother instilled in me, often by force, I might say, the value of education. She encouraged me always to learn. In fact, she didn't encourage me only, she commanded me to keep studying, to work hard, to be productive, to beat average. And because of that, that infused in me the love of learning. I have enjoyed my life learning. I was very lucky again also because when she died, my uncle Andreas and my auntie Georgia from Melbourne, they took me to Australia. They brought me here in Melbourne. And that was a big stroke of luck because this country is one of the best countries in the world, and it has been fantastic to me. I always liked technology. I always liked fixing things, although most of the times I would break things in an endeavor to fix them actually. But because of that, I did have a bent for technology, if you like. So first of all, I studied English to matriculate. I then studied at university. Electrical engineering was my first degree. I did computing, and then I got a bachelor's in master's and PhD from the University of Queensland. But I always liked learning. So because I liked learning so much, I became an academic and a researcher because I figured, well, it's a great job, and therefore people now actually pay you to be a student. They pay you to learn. So that's how I got into R&D and became it was really how I became into the space industry was quite accidental, but my background was very much R&D and the academic life.
What a great story, and thanks for sharing that. Uh, Being born in Greece, you have an affinity with the local scientific landscape there. Uh, can small countries, Andy, like Greece, make a difference through their involvement in space activities?
Yes, absolutely they can, Paul. Greece, like Australia, or Greeks like Australians, are very smart. They're very smart countries. You look, and I've been around, I know the education system very well. Harvard, Stanford, MIT, Oxford, Cambridge, and the best universities in the world are actually full of Greeks who teach or are students in those fine institutions. And they actually receive their training, most of them receive their basic education in Greece. So Greece is definitely capable and smart enough to do that. But indeed, it's actually also doing things because we already have collaborations with Greece, Greek universities, and Greece has the advantage of being a member of the European Space Agency. So they've already began to do work, particularly in remote sensing. In other words, in taking pictures from space for them to be able to analyze that data and enhance agriculture, enhance all sorts of different applications that those things do for us. So Australia and Greece are not really that far apart in the journey of becoming a space-faring nation, because now you don't need $500 million and 5 years to build a space satellite. You can do it much, much cheaper than that. Until recently, although Australia launched, I think it was the fourth country in the world to launch a satellite, because of the expense and the complexity, we kind of hadn't been in the space race until recently. Now things are much cheaper. Access to space is much easier. And therefore, countries like Greece and Australia, of course, and many others are making it possible now for them to contribute.
Now,
And of course, this is a $500 billion global industry. Space is a big industry and develops high-tech capabilities, and therefore it's great for developing the economy, and say the Australian economy, for instance, which for very long has been relying on agriculture and mining.
certainly adds that diversity.
Yeah.
Now, in science, Andy, intellectual property is very important. How does the industry achieve international collaboration and create a win-win situation for all involved?
Yes, IP, intellectual property, is very, very important. Uh, but it's all of the work that is done in high-tech areas, in everything we do, really, in everything we make. Very much, it is about collaboration. In the old times, the artisans, the cobblers, the bread makers, the goldsmiths, they could actually work by themselves to build that artifact. Well, today the world is highly, highly complex. It's a labyrinth of complexity, so you can't do that alone. Just to give you an example, for instance, your modern aeroplane is full of complex systems. You have the propulsion, the engine system of an aeroplane. You have the avionics, the flight control, the hydraulics, the air conditioning, the entertainment system. It's all a matter of systems, subsystems that make that kind of technology possible. And that comprises of millions of parts and millions, well, multiple systems and subsystems. Now, if you take the average aircraft manufacturer like Airbus, they have about more than 100,000 employees. But actually, they only make 15% of the plane. The rest of it is done through collaboration, through large companies, small companies, SMEs that are doing small parts and provide that knowledge and the technologies to build something as big as an aeroplane. And of course, space is even bigger than that. So the IP issues, the win-win protocols and processes have already been worked out so that the big companies don't need the small ones because they actually need the supply chain. They need the smaller companies. So it is possible, but it is about collaboration. And it certainly works. It's working in all of these high-tech industries because without it, you cannot do the things that you could have done in the past by yourself.
And finally, Andy, if a younger person wanted a career in the space industry, what path, in your opinion, should they take?
Well, I think that space is a great career for young people. It future proofs, I think, their jobs of the future, their career. Uh, Space is very inspiring as well. It attracts a lot of people. Apart from dinosaurs, young children love astronauts. They love space. So it's easy to attract them to basically raise their interest. But in terms of them to actually achieve success, they do need, it's a high-tech area. So therefore, the average person needs to actually study STEM type subjects because it is a high-tech STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, those types of subjects in high school, but also at university. So that's one of the big areas that I would encourage people to do that. You can have a wonderfully rewarding career in the space tech industry. But if your child is not interested in STEM, in those more scientific and mathematical sciences, space is very multidisciplinary. The work that we do in space requires business skills, it requires arts and design, in fact. There is space health, space biology, space medicine. So it is really quite a big breadth. And therefore, pretty much everyone, if you aspire to enter the space ecosystem, to have a space-related career, you don't only need to you don't need to be studying mathematics or science, physics, and so on. But it would be an advantage if you did study those subjects because it is a high technology area. I would encourage, of course, parents and teachers to support and inspire children because not only, as I've said in the beginning, this provides them with an opportunity to really future-proof their careers, but also it builds a much stronger Australia, much stronger nation. Because if you look at the world around us, why couldn't Australia be like Germany, like South Korea, like the US, like Singapore, where Taiwan, these are high-tech countries, nations that have very little resources, and yet they do so much better economically than we do. So we want to make sure that we make a contribution to our society, our country, and turning our country not only a beautiful, lucky country that has great resources, but also a high-tech nation as well.
Certainly, a high-tech nation is very important, and hopefully the future goes that way. Andy, thank you for sharing your insights with us today.
It has been my privilege and my pleasure. Thank you very much.
That's all for today, Delphi Connect. On behalf of all of us at Delphi Bank, thanks for joining us. Bye for now.